Um, Thank you so much, Dr. Payoshni Mitra, for joining me. I mean, it's been a few years since we've met physically, but I mean, I follow your work a lot. You know, the amazing stuff that you do for women in sport, and I think with it being Mental Health Month, and a lot has happened, and I know you were quite, let's say, involved in two major matters that took the world stage, one being the Caster Semenya case and the other being the Iman Khalif uproar that took place during the Olympics. Um, and I just wanted to get your insights and your ideas as to how do we work towards helping athletes with mental health, but not just athletes ourselves as well, or women in the space with mental health. I mean, look, I know I could be wrong, but I know with the Caster Semenya case, you were very involved in a lot of the things that took place. And I think it would be crazy of us to sit here and say it didn't affect her mentally, because it did. But how was that involvement for you?
Particularly on Caster Semenya's case, you mean?
Yes.
Thank you, first of all, Munira, for inviting me. It's been always lovely to see you when I have visited Pretoria for the South Africa Women in Sport Foundation. And it's a pleasure meeting you online today, and thank you for inviting me to your podcast. Indeed, I have been part of these very, headline making sort of incidents in sport for some time now, 15 years of working with athletes who have been impacted by sex testing policies. So it's a lot of work that has went into what we see today as court cases at the level of European Court of Human Rights. You obviously have the lawyers representing Caster Semenya from South Africa and Canada and the UK. But for me, as an advocate for gender equality in sport, it was quite a huge thing to observe Castor at the European Court of Human Rights Grand Chamber, where there were 17 judges um, listening to the arguments of both sides on the 15th of May, 2024. Um, Both myself and one of my colleagues who I have worked with for many years now, Katrina Karkazis, we just decided to be there to witness the fact that this issue on sport and inclusion was being heard at the highest court of human rights. And we were interveners. We had made submission as interveners, as experts in the field. That was our role, but we have also been very closely working with athletes, not only Castus Mania, who's a great champion and a dear friend, but also other athletes from across Africa and Asia. It was really important to be there for us. Having been part of Dutee Chand's case, Castor's case, recently Maximila Emali's case, and also sort of witnessing what happened during Paris Olympics with Iman Khalif, as you just pointed out. I was in Paris around that time. I also watched Iman compete, and I also, sort of experienced the love that she received inside the stadium. And I realized that what you hear on social media is not necessarily what you witness in real life. It's a parallel sort of, sort of medium platform that we have created where people are really ugly. People are really making terrible comments, very derogatory comments. Whereas inside the stadium where she was competing, there was huge support for Iman and lots of Algerian fans themselves, but a lot of other fans like me who witnessed her win that day. I think it's really important for us to understand that who are being these loud voices on social media and whether at all we should take these voices as representative of the larger world.
I definitely think so. I mean, I actually watched a BBC interview of you where, I mean, you just reiterated what you said, is that, you were there, you experienced it, you experienced the love. But however, I mean, on social media, it was a totally different scenario. And then subsequently having watched her other interviews after the Olympic Games, and, she went on about how she actually knew the athlete, she's trained with the athlete, um, which was quite mind-boggling for some of us because, if we know each other, how do you go and create such an uproar on the world stage on a fellow female athlete?
And yes, you're right that she's been in Italy and she was competing against this particular athlete. And we must also not forget that this athlete from Italy had actually apologized for her actions
Mhm.
that day. The thing is, once you have something like that happening inside the ring at the Olympics, that becomes huge news. But the
Yeah.
fact that later on, the same athlete had um, apologized for saying being disrespectful towards Emaine. That did not make an equally big headline,
Yeah.
so which is
Yes.
unfortunate. But also the fact that this is international sport, this is very competitive level of sport, and we do see such kind of behavior among athletes. I think it's more to do with the hyper competitive space of sport rather than not. But on the other hand, I also want to point out that there were other athletes. There was an Irish champion who has beaten Emaine several times, and she spoke openly in support of Emaine Khalif,
Mhm.
saying that I have beaten her, I have played against her, and I think she's there, and rightfully so. So there were quite a few supportive voices. The problem is when people like Elon Musk, people like J.K. Rowling, people like Martina Navratilova speak against a woman from Algeria. Now, I also want to point out here, Munira, interestingly, you will see that there is obviously the International Boxing Association, which is suspended, and there was politics of the IBA and the IOC at play. And I felt that these athletes were just collateral damage in the process. But what you see here is kind of the Russian government, their politics around not being very tolerant towards the LGBTIQ community connected to this issue. You also see how at the US elections now, this sort of idea of sport and inclusion is becoming an important, topic. And you see even Trump has his sort of pamphlets full of Save Women Sport stuff. So
Mhm.
you see who are these people who are actually talking against inclusion. And
Mhm.
it's sad to sort of witness that someone like Martina Navratilova, who we
Yeah.
have actually grown up admiring, is siding with people like Trump and the Russian government on this issue. If you are speaking the same language as President Trump or the Russian government on LGBTIQ inclusion, particularly INT inclusion, then you are actually siding with these people. Now, what does that say about Martina Navratilova? I would love to know.
Look, most definitely. I think it was just a crazy situation, and it was really sad how it played out on social media. And it was encouraging for me to have to listen to what you had to say about the support that she had internally. But I also think for me, her being from Algeria, and what really broke my heart in everything was when her dad had now come out and started taking out baby pictures of her. I think that was so heartbreaking for me, and a father or a parent out there trying to prove that this is my daughter, this is who she is, this is what she is, in the face of this uproar. I mean, is he heard? Is he not heard? Is she heard? Is she not heard? But I mean, she handled it beautifully, amazingly. I'm sure internally she was really going through the most, but in the public space, I really admired how much she handled it. And I mean, going back to Custer, it was the same. She was at the cusp of losing her dream, her career, but how she handled it publicly was actually quite amazing.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that. In fact, Castor was in Paris around the time when I was there, and we had a chat about it when, this sort of the media uproar was taking place around Amen. And we were thinking about it and we were discussing it, that how she went through all of this several years back, but the world seems to not uh, change,
Hmm.
um, or progress at all. Um, and yes, and as a South African, I think you're very aware of how Caster Semenya was resilient. And I think we did notice similar resilience from Iman Khalif, which is wonderful to watch on one hand, and it's inspiring for us. But at the same time, they really don't need to do it. They shouldn't be doing it. They
Yeah.
shouldn't expected to constantly defend themselves while all they are wanting to do is train and compete and be successful, right? The point that, Castor was a South African, Black woman, the fact that Emaine is an Arab, I think these are important. It's important for us to point out, and all these people, J.K. Rowling, Elon Musk, Martin Navratilova, and Trump, and the Russians, everyone, there is an element of racism here, and we cannot completely ignore that.
No, look, most definitely. I think the next question I was gonna, but you've already answered that, i- is it that way motivated? Because um, one person says something and then people just jump on it without facts. Yes, it's social media. I understand that everybody feels that they have a voice. They can just go and say whatever it is that they want to say and how they want to say it. But these are real people that you're dealing with. These are real careers you're dealing with. These are real feelings that you're dealing with.
Yes, and the families, as you have pointed out already. I mean, what do the families go through? I mean,
Mhm.
this is not the first time and I have been working with several, in dozens athletes across the world who have been impacted by sex testing policies, cisgender women, those who were assigned female sex at birth, brought up as girls, always identified as girls and women, and have always competed as girls or women. These women have been impacted by sex testing policies. Whether or not they have sex variations is a different issue. But I think, it's just terrible what the families go through,
Mhm.
what cultural context they are coming from. We are often not paying attention to it. And we are in our world of social media. We want more followers. The
Yes.
way some of these people are speaking, it's obviously sort of to titillate or to sort of make comments in order to have a few more followers. Can you
Mhm.
imagine? But what the kind of harm that you are causing in that process, and they're completely blind towards that, that is very, very hurtful. And especially when it comes from people we have looked up to, sport feminists, incredible athletes like Martina Navratilova. It really hurts that, why? Why
Yeah.
aren't you able to see the harm that you are causing by saying these ugly words on social media?
Yes. Why are you verifying something that you have no well, I wouldn't say answer, but you have what's the word I'm looking for? You don't have the facts, you know? And
Exactly. So,
why get onto the
factual
hype?
information. There was no place for factual information, even in the news media. I was giving interviews in the news media, and I was asked questions and constantly constantly these athletes are being mispronounced without any information. You're mispronouncing someone, questioning their very identity. And I was on live television saying that how can you be a news channel if you are constantly saying things which are factually incorrect? I mean, there's no respect for that. There is no respect for these people because we come from a different part of the world which is why we don't deserve the dignity that white women deserve, and that really hurts.
No, it really did, and that's why I say I think with everything, the most heartbreaking thing for me was when her dad now pulled out these pictures, and I was like, I can't imagine as a parent, and having to justify my child's existence first and foremost, and secondly, unnecessarily so.
Yes. But this has been happening for years, 15 years of us doing this work, right? 2009 is when Castor ran that race at Berlin World Championships. 2009. We are 15 years since then, and we are still having the same conversations. In fact, the level of our conversations have gone worse than how it used to be in 2009. We are way more, sort of ugly in our fights.
Mhm.
Um, we are really negative. We don't care whether we are saying things, fact checking things. It's becoming worse and worse with social media. And no one's bothered about what kind of impact this might have in the life of these women back home. For example, we're talking about Emaine and Castor here, and they're really strong personalities, great heroes in their own countries, which you know gives them some sort of strength and and power.
Mhm.
Whereas there are athletes who I work with not as successful but have been terribly impacted by these sex testing policies over and over again in countries where you know, where laws do not support the existence of LGBTIQ people. And it becomes way more difficult in those contexts
Mhm.
because in South Africa, you have a great constitution and you have very supportive laws. I know that a lot of work still needs to be done at the ground level because there are still in the society a lot of intolerance as to same-sex relationships, for example. But at the same time, you have the laws and your constitution is supportive, which is not the case in many other countries.
Talking about how the South African Constitution is so much, advanced as opposed to, other countries and how the reckless statements then affect people from these countries.
I mean, in India, for example, and or any other country, talk about Kenya, Uganda, the laws are not supportive. The laws are not making it worse for these women to be in their countries. We have one athlete whom we had to help relocate to another country for safety. We are working on other athletes as well at this point to help them relocate because life is becoming increasingly unsafe because these regulations and these policies and these controversies increase the level of scrutiny on them and on their private lives.
Mhm.
And that really creates huge risk for them. And therefore, there is an increasing need to help many of these women relocate to other parts of the world. That's been a part of the work that I'm currently doing with my new organization, Humans of Sport. Um, and we, as sport, officials, as sport administrators, people in those leadership positions need to understand the impact of these policies, not only within the arena of sport, but outside it.
Mm-hmm.
The lives of these women are impacted.
Mm-hmm.
The obviously we have spoken enough about the sex testing policies, the investigations, how intrusive they are, the surgeries and everything that one might have to undergo, how that has an lifelong impact on their bodies and on their health. But we have to also look into the fact that many of these women are increasingly unsafe in their countries.
Okay. No, I think, you would think that with everything that's happening and how it unfolds on the world stage, that policymakers would be quicker and better in improving policies around the protection of women in sport. Look, don't get me wrong, a lot more has been done. I mean, we finally have I mean, the Olympic Village had a breastfeeding facility, and and certain things, and FIFA's done a lot of work with regards to women who would then have babies, and when they come back, how they what policy should be in place for them and stuff like that. There's been a lot of work that's been done, but is it enough?
Of course not. Having said that, I think I also want to point out that, there are these issues about women's equal pay, equal opportunities, and breastfeeding centers, nurseries. Having nurseries in the villages is one of those things which enables a woman who's a mother to continue to compete, right? So these are really important. Things about equal resources, equal pay, as an athlete, as a coach, equal, safeguarding, for example, an abuse-free sporting world. We can talk about all these extremely important issues, which are really important in the context of women's sport. But what do you hear the most? It is about inclusion of women with sex variations and women who are transgender women. It's a minuscule number of women in the entire world of sport.
Mhm.
It's not a big threat. It is not a threat, but
Yeah.
we make it look like it's a threat. It's really, we are talking about a really, really minuscule number of people who might be transgender women or who might be women with sex variations. We don't even know in these cases. There are allegations without any proof. Now, this cannot be a threat. The threat to women's sport is the fact that the sporting field is not safe. It
Yeah.
is not safe from harassment. It is not safe from discrimination, whether physical, sexual, or verbal. So we need to sort of talk about those things. We need to talk about facilities. We need to talk about barriers to a woman participating in sport. These are important. Equal pay is important.
Mhm.
Whether or not a few women are transgender, or whether or not a few women have some form of sex variations, even though they are cisgender women, that is not a threat to women's sport. Let's get that clear.
Yeah, yeah.
But our policymakers don't get it always. I mean, obviously, I must congratulate the International Olympic Committee and President Bach for having the framework for inclusion, fairness, and non-discrimination. It's a very important piece of document which should work as a guideline for several other sporting organizations. Now,
Yeah.
FIFA has also been doing a great, lot of good work. I must say, I have often gone to FIFA
Okay.
with any issue myself, and I have received support for the athlete from FIFA's Human Rights Department or the Women's Department,
Mhm.
which is not the case with many other federations.
Yeah.
Now we know that the IOC presidency elections, are coming, and we know that Sebastian Coe from World Athletics, who's currently the president of World Athletics, is one of the candidates who's running for the IOC presidency. And what he is clearly talking about is this inclusion issue, that he wants to change the IOC for better and make women's sport, free of um, women with sex variations or women who are transgender women. This is the campaign that he is running at this point. It really worries me because I believe that if Seb Coe is elected as the next president of the IOC, this is going to take us all back many, many years. If we really want a progressive International Olympic Committee, we need to have a leader who's progressive. President Bach has been doing a great job, and I hope whoever succeeds him continues with the good work on inclusion that he has started with the framework.
Yeah, I think, everybody speaks inclusion until it's time for inclusion, Everybody speaks, um, let's let's do the right thing when it's time to say it. But how often is it done, Because if it was, a platform would not be created where a woman who is just trying to achieve her dream of being an athlete be bullied on a world stage.
Yeah. And, it is a very good point that you are raising here about whether there is real action.
Mhm.
And in my experience, not only as an activist, but also as somebody who has been in management as well as governance in sport organizations in Lausanne, in Geneva, I uh, am what I see being a woman of color from India. What I see here is a lot of tokenism.
Mhm.
And what you see, they love to
Mhm.
portray that they are inclusive, but they
Yeah.
don't want the systems to change. They want the master's tools still be at work. The processes, the approaches, the system, the structure, everything should stay the same. But we hire women and men of color who come and fit in. That's what they want. They don't want us to recommend something new. They don't want us to build something new, which is better than what they had traditionally. They're
Mhm.
very fearful of that. The sporting, ecosystem is very traditional, very fearful of change. And even though today, for the sake of media, they need to have these women and men of color in some form, in some leadership, and in some commissions, and in some governance boards, are we really allowed to change that world? No.
Wow. Wow. Very interesting. It's very interesting. What can we as the activists do?
I mean, you don't give up. If you're an activist, you're working to build a better future. And even if you don't get results today, you continue to fight. Not giving up is the key to progressive change. It might not happen today. We thought we did very well when we won the case Dutee Chand fought in 2015. Then they came back with the fresh regulations in 2018. We fought against it with CASTA and we lost that. We again went to Swiss Federal Tribunal. We lost that. Then we went to European Court of Human Rights, lower chamber. We won that time. But now Switzerland has gone to the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights. So we are now waiting to hear what the judgment that the Grand Chamber will give us. But you see, it's like you take a few steps forward, you go or two steps back, but you again try to move forward. So it's a constant thing. You cannot give up. You're constant. You have to be relentless, really relentless to be able to get where we want to. We may not see it in our lifetime sometimes, but we still fight. And I think that's the job of us as activists.
Dr. Mitra, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and just having this chat with me. It's been quite enlightening. And yeah, not giving up, moving forward. And yes, it might not be in my lifetime or in your lifetime, but as long as we keep moving it forward.
Thank you so much, Moneda, for the opportunity.
Thank you.